Om Dhyanatimirandasya Jnananasalakaya Chakshu Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Narayana Parayana Jarahankara Nashana Rupanugametra Prem Puroshate Namah Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapara-kamalam Shri Guram Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vitam Tvam Sajivam Swadvetam Savadutam Prahijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. So, first of all, offering my heartfelt obeisances to my spiritual master and our whole lineage of realized spiritual preceptors that in an unbroken succession extend all the way back to Sri Krishna himself. And in this way, one drop of their divine mercy descends to us on this very day. Is there any particular questions or subject matter that you guys would like to hear about or discuss today? No? So why do we keep repeating the same mental programming? Why do we keep the same behaviors? As I've mentioned before, our subconscious mind is a storehouse of unlimited impressions. And these impressions rotate from the subconscious mind into the active part of the consciousness. The active part of the consciousness in Sanskrit is called tanu. And when that impression then fades into the background and another one rotates forward, that is called a vikschinna. And when an impression enters from the subconscious mind into the conscious part of the mind, depending on your energetic state, is how that will influence how you respond to that impression in the active part of the consciousness. If you are in the mode of tamas, the energy of dullness, inertia, very slow energy, then you might be too lazy to act upon that impression. And the next modality of energy, the energy of rajas, fire, creativity, passion. When any impression comes in during that time, then that causes the conjunction of the awareness and the samskara, the imprint, and you will act upon that impression. And the next mode of energy, sattva gun. If an impression comes into your active part of your consciousness, because the quality of sattva is equilibrium, clarity, patience, then you can exercise some free will and think, do I actually want to act upon that impression or not? So that's why it's very helpful to try to cultivate a lifestyle that increases sattva gun, increases the energy of clarity, equilibrium, and then we can really start to be masters of our own destiny. One time there was one king, and he was walking through the forest, and he was quite thirsty, and he came across a hermitage, one hut of one sage, and he went into that hut, and he was looking for water. And then he met the sage, and the sage welcomed him and greeted him and said, yes, please take a seat. I can offer you some water. And then after the king had taken a seat, he said to the sadhu, oh, who are you? And then that sadhu said, I'm a Maharaj, I'm a king. And then that king thought, this is a strange answer. So then that king, he said to the sage, if you're a king, where's your army? Because kings should have large armies, right? And then that sage said, I have no enemies, so I don't need an army. And then that king thought, oh, good answer. And then the king said, if you're a king, where's your treasury? And then the sage thought about it. And he said, the yogis are completely satisfied and are fulfilled within their heart. And one who is complete within himself, he needs less external things than anyone else. So therefore, his wealth is internal wealth, internal peace, a state of mind that is not grasping for external things for comfort and a false sense of peace. So therefore, he is truly wealthy, and I don't need any external treasury. So then the king thought, oh, another good answer. So then he thought, okay, if you're a king, where's your kingdom? And then the sage answered, the yogis, by engaging in bhakti yoga, devotional service, they completely conquer their senses. They completely conquer their own mind, and therefore their own being is the most sublime place to exist. And because that is so nice to dwell in one's being when there's no attacks from one's own mind, then one can rest in the beauty of one's own consciousness. So therefore, my kingdom is internal. And then that king thought, oh, this guy's got really good answers. So then he said, every king should have a queen. So where's your queen? And then the sage thought about it, and he said, I don't have a queen because I'm already married to the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is God in the form of a scripture. There are many different sastras, many different scriptures that describe something about God, something about his qualities in either direct or indirect way. But there's one very nice Vedic scripture which is like the ripe juicy mango on the tree of the Vedas, and that is called Srimad Bhagavatam. So that sage, he's saying, I'm married to this Bhagavatam, and in this way I have the most wonderful constant companion in my life and the most royal partner possible. So what is the need for any external queen. And the king started to think about all these answers very deeply. And he started to realize all that he had acquired in his life, kingdom, treasury, chariots, gold, so many queens, all of these were trying to fulfill an internal void within himself. So he had no internal treasury. Everything was external. All these things, they were coming from a sense of lack within him, and he was trying to fulfill that lack. So then he realized, oh, this Maharaj really is Maharaj, and I'm just a slave to my senses and mind. So this sublime practice of bhakti yoga, in a very wonderful way, it teaches us how we can all become Maharaj, how we can all become the king or queen of our own internal kingdom. And last time we were talking about surrender, and for the persona, for the ego, the false self, its entire existence is dependent upon not surrendering. So this becomes quite problematic when you're trying to surrender, because you have an ego, well, two aspects here. When you have an ego that's trying to surrender, but that same ego is dependent upon holding on, it's very difficult, actually impossible on that level of consciousness. And the ego has a great fear of letting go because, like I just mentioned, its existence is dependent upon holding on to something. And the ego doesn't care what it identifies with. It just wants to identify with something. I am male, I am female, my name is so-and-so, I'm from this place on earth, I'm a businessman, I'm a mother, I'm a surfer, I'm a party animal, I'm a religious person. All just chitta-vrittis, waves in the consciousness that we cling on to and we identify with. But actually, you're none of these things. They are just upadis, they're designations. And then we construct entire artificial realities around these non-permanent senses of identity we have fluctuating in the mind. And the more you identify with a false sense of identity, the more constricted your life becomes, and the harder it becomes to surrender. And as I've mentioned before, we're not in control of what thoughts come through our consciousness, because if we were, we could switch it on and off like a light. But for most people, they can't do that. And when you see that, it's liberating in the sense that you're not responsible for all the nonsense thoughts that come through your consciousness. Because if you were really in control of these thoughts, you would probably pick quite nice thoughts to come through your consciousness. So it's liberating in that sense. You are not generating your thoughts, they are actually products of these samskaras, of these impressions in your consciousness. And then these impressions, if when you look upon the world, you're looking upon the world through the filter of your previous impressions. So that is shaping your thoughts. And if you walk past the shop and there's a chocolate bar, then the impression of previously enjoying chocolate comes to the forefront of your consciousness. And then if Rajaguna is there, you will say, yes, I must act upon that impression of enjoying chocolate. And then you go and reach for the chocolate. If Sattva-guna is there, then you can think, do I really want the chocolate or not? So it's so fundamental to start to be masters of our own reality, is to elevate ourselves up from these lower energies, at least to the level of Sattva-guna, and then from there, it's a very good springboard to go into the spiritual energy. Otherwise, we're just at the dictates of our own mind, and there's practically no free will in that level of consciousness. So a key aspect here really is humility. And it is said that there's 4 prominent limitations that the conditioned living entity has. So the first one is we have imperfect senses. Our eyes can see only a certain spectrum of light. Our ears can only hear a certain bandwidth of frequency. Our sense of smell is limited. Our entire physical apparatus has very much limitations. So because our physical apparatus, through which we're trying to grasp, perceive and understand reality, because it only has a certain bandwidth in which it can perceive and operate, anything outside of the scope of that, it's unknown through that physical modality of exploration. So therefore, we often try to collate reality, collapse it down into that bandwidth that we can perceive. But we know there's so much existing outside of it, such as light, and dogs can hear other frequencies of sounds that we can't. There's so many things, even just on this physical plane, that we scientific instruments can perceive, but the normal human body cannot. So we know for sure that there is so many things out there that are not graspable by our own sense perception. So therefore, if we're honest with ourselves and we have humility, then we can admit, my body is limited, my senses are limited, so I cannot know all of reality just through my senses. People say seeing is believing, but you can only see a certain spectrum of light. What about what's outside of that? So you can only see something very, very tiny. You can't see the atom. You can't see all of the cosmos. You can only see some distance in front of you. So this thought of pratyaksha, direct perception through the visual cortex, that seeing is believing, we do not accept this as being the ultimate evidential way of perceiving reality. So you can put that one aside. Senses, rule them out. They have utility. We can touch things, we can see things. Very useful, but for investigating what is the ultimate truth, the senses, it cannot be done through that modality. So put that one aside. And number 2, in the terms of the obstacles that all the conditioned living entities have, we will make mistakes. I'm not sure about any of you guys, but I've made quite a few mistakes in my life. Actually, when I reflect back on my life, the majority of my life has been mistakes with a few good decisions here and there. But that's led to some good lessons too. So, therefore, we have a tendency to make mistakes. Number 3, an illusion. I'll come back to these in a minute. And number 4 is the cheating propensity. So we have imperfect senses, we have the tendency to make mistakes, we are an illusion, and we have the propensity to cheat ourselves and others. So the Supreme Truth, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, he is a Dokshaja, beyond sense perception. So as long as you're trying to find God within the purview of your very limited sense perception, you'll never find him there, because he's beyond the range of the senses. And number two, the propensity to make mistakes. No one can say, if they're really being honest, that they've never made a mistake. So unless you're completely perfect and all-knowing, then you will not make a mistake. But we're not all-knowing. We're not omnipotent. So then another limitation we have the tendency to make mistakes, which is completely normal for a conditioned living human. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just a recognition of the limitations that we have. Number three, to be an illusion. What does it mean to be an illusion? To be an illusion is to think, I am this body, I am this mind, I am this personality attached to this body. Because, even every 3 to 7 years, all the cells in your body, they're getting renewed, even the brain cells. So therefore, I think everyone's 21 at least here. So you've had at least 3 bodies in this life. So all the cells in your body, they're constantly getting renewed. And from about the age of 35, the proportion of the regenerating cells, that goes down, and the older cells start to increase, and then you really start to age. So in this life, we will have so many bodies. And which body are you? Are you the baby body? Are you the 10-year-old? Are you the 15-year-old going to school? Are you in college? Growing older? Which body are you if you're your body? Your body's constantly changing, and the mind is constantly changing. Thoughts always moving, feelings, emotions always just coming through like clouds in the sky, and you have not much control over it. Because if you really analyze your life deeply, particularly when there's tamas and rajagun there, we are the recipients of thought. We are not the generators of thought. So whatever thought's coming in, we receive that and most likely identify with it, and then get into a mental narrative around it, and then have a whole life experience around it. But we're not really in charge of generating it ourselves. So we're subservient to the thought that comes through. So to be an illusion, we're all an illusion. And the cheating propensity. So what does this mean? Often, even if we really try to practice morality, there will very much be a tendency just to twist things in our own favor. If there's 2 children drowning, one's your child and one's another one, someone else's child, which one are you going to save? You'll save your own child first. Nothing wrong with that. But we always will manipulate reality within a spectrum to try and serve our own agenda. This is a natural propensity of the conditioned living entity. So we have these 4 obstacles, these 4 defects, these 4 limitations. And failure to recognize this, then our ego just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And we just get more and more lost in so many ideas, so many non-correlating thought constructs in our consciousness that we superimpose on reality, but they're really just like unfinished thoughts that we don't finish all the way through, and we just live in a very shallow existence within the pool of the mind. So it takes humility just to recognize this, and honesty to accept it. And it's not that then you have to go and be all depressed about yourself or anything like that. It's just recognizing, hey, my body and mind has limitations. And when I'm actually trying to investigate what's real, what's actually true, just to be referencing my own sense perception in my own mind, I'll never arrive at any valid conclusion. So, also you can say this is like one form of surrender, to accept I have limitations. And Arjuna is actually displaying this in the first chapter of the Gita. He's realizing the limitations of his own confused thinking, his own internal mind state. And then he approaches Krishna. Oh Krishna, you're not an illusion. So this is the whole dynamic of their guru-disciple relationship. If we really want to find out what's true and be able to come to a level of realization ourselves, then we have to come under the guidance of someone who is situated in transcendental consciousness, who is beyond these four defects and beyond the fluctuating energies of the gunas, these three modes of material nature. So that is Sadguru, the bona fide teacher. And just like Arjuna in the Gita, he takes shelter of this personality. But because the ego is dependent upon not surrendering, this is not such an easy process for most people. And really to surrender, it takes trust in that person. And so yes, there's exceptional cases where people meet their guru and they can wholeheartedly surrender their life to that person. But the traditional Vedic system is you, for the first year at least, is like a testing period where the guru is testing you. Is this disciple actually sincere, or do they just want a catchy Sanskrit name and like to post on Instagram that they have a guru? Or are they really sincere about inquiring into the truth? So the traditional system is a testing period. And then you can also observe the behavior of the guru. Is he actually walking his talk? Or is he just trying to get more disciples, more money, more cars, more gold, more wealth? Or is he actually genuinely situated in transcendental consciousness and really his sole purpose in terms of being engaged with the conditioned souls is just to lift them out of illusion? So sometimes it can become like a trend to get a guru without following an actual process. And in this way it just becomes the cheaters and the cheated. So surrendering to God first comes in the form of surrendering to Guru, because in one sense there's a non-difference between the two. So God comes in the form of Guru to give you a personal manifestation who you can take shelter of. Here's another interesting point. Because the ego, its whole existence is based upon non-surrender, then we can rationalize non-surrender to appear like surrender. So we can rationalize to ourselves, I don't really need a guru, or this is not the guru for me, or all gurus are bogus, or so many narratives. And in this way we can rationalize and justify to ourselves, or even if we have a guru, oh, I can't follow all of his instructions because of this, that, and so many other things. And in this way, we still hold on to some false sense of identity within the ego. And then our flow of surrender becomes inhibited, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he has said that surrender and faith, they go hand in hand. The degree to which you have surrendered, to that degree you can have faith. And as I've mentioned before, Bhakti Rakshakshita Maharaj, he says, all fear arises from forgetfulness of our common guardian. So if there's fear on any level in the consciousness, then we're forgetful that everything is under the shelter of God's arrangement. And due to our conditioned thinking, we're thinking in so many different categories. But one great personality, he said, the sign of an enlightened person is he sees the oneness first, and the sign of a conditioned soul is he sees the difference first. So very much in modern times, the whole educational system, the whole society is orientated around the meta-narrative of breaking things down part by part by part by part, completely removed from any kind of holistic perception of how everything is interlinked together. And then this has very profound effects on the society in general, when you have a narrative of this life is meaningless, you're here by random chance. All these things arise from the physical analysis of reality, of just trying to break things down part by part by part, which has its utility on a certain spectrum of reality, but it cannot explain the entirety of reality, because again, it's only working within the purview of the limited sense perception. Those that are actually surrendered, they have no fear. So just feel into that for a moment. What would it be like in your life to have no fear? And I don't mean that in any kind of silly way of like walking in front of a bus or jumping into the lion's den at the zoo. I mean, in a practical way. No fear. There's a verse in the Tao Te Ching. A man is ready for death, like a man is ready for rest after a hard day's physical labor. Because very deeply rooted within this egoic persona consciousness is the fear of death, because it's always trying to keep itself alive. And actually the ego is so wonderful, we can say in one sense, that even to keep the idea of itself alive, it can give up its own body. So I'll become glorious in battle or in war and something like this, and I will give up my body, but my story will live on in history forever, and in this way I'll be very glorious. But you see, there's actually one tablet found with inscriptions, and it's something like, I am so-and-so, the Almighty, behold my great vast kingdom. And so a couple of things, he was either a madman writing, or actually he had a very vast kingdom, but all that was left is a single stone tablet. So in the sands of time, even if you try to cultivate some very nice egoic story of yourself, after time it will be completely washed away and nothing will be left. All that will be left is the karmic imprints in your consciousness, and you'll have to undergo so much purification for that. So if we look at Shraddha or faith and surrender as kind of being two sides of the same coin, there's three divisions of this faith or surrender: high, medium, and low. And three different categories of people, they embody these three different faiths. In India, because spirituality is so central to the culture here and for many thousands of years, the general Indian person has faith in Shastra. They have faith in the scriptures. But very much in Western countries, which is also quite fair to a certain degree because of all the nonsense that's gone on in religion, people have no faith in the scriptures. So then for the people outside of the East, generally speaking, it takes a lot more effort to then make them open to seeing that there may be some value in the scriptures of the world. So one level of faith is having faith that there's wisdom in the Shastra, in the scriptures. And so the topmost person who has very deep faith, very deep surrender, then all the deep teachings of the scriptures manifest within their heart. And then the middle level person, their faith is on the middle level, but they have faith in the scripture. And the lower level person, they may have some idea about having faith in the scripture, but then there's so many different what appears to be contradictory teachings. So then this creates a lot of confusion in their mind. The scripture said this teaching says that tradition says this, and they can't reconcile any of this in their consciousness. So then their faith is very weak at this stage. And where is the truth? Is it in this path? Is it in that path? Because our mind is turbulent, it's oscillating in that state of consciousness with the lower energies. We cannot reconcile the apparent contradictions in the different scriptures of the world. But when the mind becomes clear, they'll see there are no contradictions. There's only different guidance for different time, place, and circumstance. And depending on people's level of development, a particular teaching may be relevant for that place and time and circumstance, but it's not necessarily a prescription for everyone all over the world. But when the religious practitioner, actually this is not even just in religion. We can understand this from another way. If anyone takes up some new practice and they're getting some benefit from it, they become very enthusiastic. And naturally they want to share that with their friends and their family, right? But then sometimes you can become like a preacher knocking on the door of people, believe in this and go to hell. And this is not just in a religious context, it can be about a diet, a new diet fad, or anything like this. And then you're trying to push it on everyone. Because at this level of consciousness, you don't actually know how to interact with people. And I'm sorry to say, but the majority of religious people are also in this category. So then they try and force their things on people, and they don't know how to actually even just interact on a human level, let alone on a spiritual level. And this puts people so much off religion because it becomes a propensity, an energetic dynamic of just trying to recruit people to your position. Whether you're a Christian, a Hare Krishna, or a vegan, you're just trying to make more followers for your belief system. Whether that's actually the best thing for that person or not, you don't really care. Because your faith is weak. And because your faith is weak, you need more people to follow what you're doing, because then that makes you feel better about what you're doing. But when your faith is strong, it's no longer an energetic dynamic about recruiting people to your position. It's about really sharing something that you're really realizing and tasting the greatness of it. And that's a completely different energetic dynamic to come from rather than believe in this and go to hell. Yeah? So, in terms of surrender, there's 6 angas or limbs, practical ways in which we can help implement this surrender. The question may come, well, why do I need to surrender? My life's okay, I'm here in Goa, relaxing, sipping coconuts on the beach. What's all this nonsense about surrender? There's a spectrum of people here. So, this our struggle in life, for some people, their struggle may be very overt. It may be very much on the surface. And for some people, it may be almost in a state of dormancy, because this is one quality, actually, also of sattva gun, is you become conditioned by a sense of satisfaction. So in that modality of sattva gun, there's no necessity to progress further. What for? I'm pretty happy sipping coconuts on the beach. But the very nature of these 3 gunas, they're like 3 strands on a rope. They're always intermixed, and one may be on top for some time, but then it will shift, because that's the very nature of this cosmos. One day the sun will burn out, all the planets will be reduced to dust. It's the constant flux of energy. This is the very nature of these worlds, of this whole universal manifestation. So just for a very short time, in accordance with your karma, you may feel a level of satisfaction, everything's going okay. And in this way, why do I need to improve? What's the need for God? I've got my nice house, my holiday home in Goa. I come here every year or whatever. What's all this nonsense about God? These people running around chanting Hare Krishna, why don't they get a real job? But this is very short-sighted vision, so short-sighted vision. And even if you have one whole life of good karma, you can't take any of it with you. You can't take your house, you can't take your holiday home, you can't take any of the physical possessions you create here. So at the time of death, all you take is your karmic impressions in your consciousness. And if you've done nothing to elevate your spiritual level, then you can just go down and down and down into the species, further and further down. There's no guarantee that you will take human birth again. So just because you have a human birth now, don't think that you'll be just going up, up, up. It doesn't work like that. So this precious human birth, try to make the most of it. Try to engage in spiritual practice so you can really be free from this struggle once and forever. Because some people, their struggle is very overt. Actually, so many people, and it's increasing more and more in this world. Mental health, physical health disorders, scarcity, hunger, all these things are increasing. Even here in India, life is so hard for so many people. So not everyone has the luxury of just sipping coconuts for a while and Goa. And very soon, you may be in a good position now, but at any moment it can change. And this is one of the key aspects of cultivating spiritual life. When your karma changes, it's not if, but when. The more spiritual work you've done, the more you'll be able to handle these constant changes of the material world. And if you've just been asleep at the wheel, watching your big 500-inch TV, then when some change comes, like a few years back, I had so many things happen in my life, and this would have caused a lot of people a lot of suffering. And I remember I was driving in my car, and my friend rang me up from the city, and he's like, I know you're going through so much, but someone just backed into my car, and I just can't handle it. It was like, kind of like a tiny little thing, but for him, it was so major in his consciousness. So And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll give you time, you talk, whatever needs to happen. So depending on the expansion of our consciousness, when it's very contracted, even the most littlest thing, that seems like the end of the world. And then if you look at the history of the great saints, they had so many challenges, but they weren't all like crybaby on Instagram about it. Because they're like Jesus on the cross, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. Because generally speaking, people aren't out there to harm you or to give you trouble. They are just acting from a state of contracted consciousness. And because they're acting from a state of contracted consciousness, they don't know how to reach out in a sattvic, in a wholesome way to get the connection, to get their needs met. Because at every moment, if you know NVC, people are just trying to get their needs met. But when we're in a state of contracted consciousness, one, we don't know how to meet those needs. And two, those needs are completely, very much rooted in illusion. And so even if we get these needs met, it doesn't lead to any kind of lasting happiness, because it's just an unfinished thought floating in space that we've identified with. Okay, so let's get to the 6 limbs of surrender. So these are some practical steps we can take in our life to help us surrender. Because as I mentioned last time, there's always a silence. Even when the mind's busy, even when you have so much melodrama going on in your life, there's always a silence. And all your melodrama is appearing in that field of silence. So one aspect of the Atma, of the soul, is Shakshi, is witnesshood consciousness, the ability to know, the ability to observe, just like a very silent observer. So the more we sit down, do our japa meditation, the more we become established in Shakshitva, witnesshood consciousness. And then even if there's noise arising, because your consciousness is so expanded, it doesn't matter if there's noise. Because so often in meditation, we have this conception that I just need to make my mind silent. I just need to make it stop. And what a greater way to create more noise than an ego trying to stop the natural function of the mind. Oh, that actually was what I was going to talk about today, but I have to do that another time. Yeah, there's some nice guitar from the Bhagavatam, but that'll be maybe tomorrow's class, about separating you from your mind, and that's actually yoga. So back to the 6 limbs of surrender. The first one is accepting that which is favorable for spiritual development. But when we're in a state of confusion, oscillation, bodily and mental identification, how do we know what's favorable? Maybe what's favorable is sitting on the couch drinking a beer, watching porn. Could be. Who knows, right? So that's why we have to take guidance from the Guru, from the Sastra, because this has all come from beyond the gunas, from someone who is not situated in the own fluctuations of their mind. So just like if you're walking through a minefield and someone has a map to that minefield, it's very good to listen to that person. So Guru is out of the minefield of the material world, and he can give you the map. Oh, follow this, then you won't get your limb blown off. But if you want to just go here and there, then you'll suffer so much. And then after many decades, Gurudev has seen this so many times, then you'll come finally, if you are lucky enough to take shelter of a Guru, then you'll be like, oh Gurudev, I've realized that, it's really wise just to surrender to you, so I've decided to do that. But what's really happened is, okay, you've taken shelter of Guru, and he empowers you, because when you take shelter of Guru, there's a transmission that happens. And then, but because we still have ego, then with that empowerment, we go off and we do so many things that we want to do. But actually it all doesn't work out. And then after a long journey, then we come back to Guru. And if there's still ego there, we say, oh, I've realized that I should take shelter of you. But actually, all that I've done hasn't worked out, so actually this is my last option. Because this propensity to have pride and ego is so strong. So number one, accept that which is favorable. Number two, reject that which is unfavorable. So again, we need to have guidance of a higher authority to have this discernment, what is favorable and what is not favorable, because it's not always clear, and it can be different for different individuals depending upon their stage of development. Of course, there's universal teachings which are applicable to everyone. Don't kill people, it's probably pretty good for most people to follow, stuff like that. But then there's also personal instructions that the living guru gives to you individually for your particular stage of development. Because sometimes what guru says to one person, they may say completely opposite to the other person, because it's not so suitable for people. So this is one aspect of having the living teacher, as he gives you personal instruction. Number three, having faith that Krishna, Bhagavan, God, will protect you. This one is actually the Angi. This is the body of all the limbs of surrender. So all these 6 limbs, this is the root. Having faith that God will protect me, that I can fully take shelter of God. Some years ago, I was in the Himalayas, quite high up, and at the last village that had internet, I sent a message to someone I knew, because I was running out of money. And I was like, oh, can you just put $100 through to cover me until some other payment comes through? And so off I went into the mountains, stayed up there for a couple of weeks, completely run out of money. And I was like, I'm going to walk 8 hours back down to that other village, past rivers and all these kinds of things, to go to the ATM and withdraw this money that I asked the person to send me. And then I can buy some food. And on the way down, 8 hours, I was thinking, when I get to the village, I'm going to have a feast. I'm going to buy some dried apples. I'm going to buy some chow mein. Oh, it's so good. So then I was walking 8 hours, crossing the river, trying to not get swept away. And then I finally arrived at the village, put my card in the machine, no money. Okay. But then I checked the internet, no message. So then I was like, okay, Krishna, this is good. I'm going to completely depend upon you. I'm not going to ask anything from anyone. And if you want me to eat, I will eat. And if you don't, then I won't. This is going to be interesting, isn't it? So then off I went, 8 hours back up the mountain. And everything came. Not everything I wanted, but everything I needed to survive just came of its own accord. And this was such a powerful experience for me, that if you can fully take shelter of God, 100% you will be looked after. You won't get the Lamborghini and all these kinds of things, but everything you need to survive will be there. But always just hanging on through the back door. Okay, I have faith in God, but I'll just put money in my savings account and get health insurance and this and that. There's nothing wrong with any of that, of course, but it can just illuminate how at the end of the day we still have more faith in our own effort than taking shelter of God. And in this way we impede the flow of surrender, and it shows the level of our faith. So that's just one little story I can share from my own experience, and that doesn't mean that I'm fully abiding in the surrender all the time. It's amazing how illusion comes back very quickly, but it was a nice experience for that time. Number 4, having knowledge that Krishna is my maintainer. So 3 and 4, he will protect me and he will maintain me. And number 6, humility. And number 5, surrendering your very self, your very soul to the Lord, because nothing belongs to you, not even your body, mind, possessions, even your own soul is Krishna's soul. So to fully surrender to that, that's actually something very, very high. So we can't do that overnight, but we can start in small steps, like I was describing last week, of just not being bothered about the changing fluctuations of the weather. And then funnily that night it started raining. and all our cushions and everything were out, so that was quite apt timing. So
The cushions are dry. Krishna maintained us.
yes, so I'll wrap it up very shortly. So I've just described these 6 types of shanagati, of surrender, mostly in a physical form, but there's also the verbal and mental aspects of these. And Jiva Goswami has described separately what's anukul, what's favorable in terms of surrender on more of a subtle mental and verbal platform. But maybe that's time for another class. So, because this topic of surrender is actually quite big. It's so simple, but path of bhakti is really simple, actually. And if we have simplicity in the heart, then it's very easy. But we have so much duplicity, so much unwanted things in the heart, and the surrender becomes very difficult. And just one other key point, we hear about surrender to God. So we heard about cultivating a relationship with Guru, so then we can really surrender to his instructions, and that takes time. So in terms of surrendering to God, we also have to cultivate a relationship. Who is he? What does he look like? What does he do? What does he get up to? What's his favorite food? How can you really take shelter when you have some vague conception? Yeah, there might be a God, there might not be a God, I'm not really sure, and if he is, he's a vague, he, she, non-gender, is just some energy floating around in space, and yeah, I'm going to surrender to that. That's probably not going to happen. So to really cultivate a personal relationship with God, then you can surrender. Arjuna had a personal relationship with Krishna, so then he could fully surrender and receive transcendental knowledge. So by surrendering to Guru is surrendering to God, and Guru cultivates that personal relationship with God. So then we can fully surrender. Otherwise, you will hang on. And the more you hang on, the more you will suffer. So thank you for patiently listening. And if anyone has any questions, thoughts, reflections, most welcome.
Only if we do not have a guru, and if we don't, because we in this life, we are in our karmas and we are in our own journey. That's also written, right? That even if we do our karmas rightly, that way also we can achieve in the path of enlightenment. So, is it necessary for us to surrender, or only sages can, are only the sages people? So sages can only achieve enlightenment, or normal people like us who have a normal life and doing stuff and just putting food on the table and all those things. So, do we have to have a guru? Is it mandatory, or like how is it? Or we can just focus on our karmas and go by that also.
Yes, very good question. So it might be taken that, okay, so we need to all just surrender everything and go to the Himalayas or go into the forest and be a sage, and anything less, we're not going to make the cut. That kind of lifestyle is impractical for most people in this age. And the fact is that we are all surrendered already, which may seem a paradox. But what are we surrendered to? We're surrendered to our mind, we're surrendered to our thoughts, we're surrendered to the influence of family. You should get a job, you should do this, you should do that. The influence of society, we've surrendered to that. Oh, I should go to school and I should get educated and this and that. Is it what I want to do? Well, I'm not even going to investigate what I want to do. It's just I'll surrender into the mainstream narrative. So we're already surrendered. And Krishna is described in the Gita in different paths of purification, and depending upon our developmental stage, he's given different prescriptions. And the path of selfless action, Niskam Karma Yoga, then the path of Gyan, cultivating knowledge. That person who cultivates their activities with non-attachment and offers the fruit to God, even without reading books, the knowledge will arise in their consciousness. So there's a spectrum of development. So there's a word in Sanskrit called sukriti. And in some lives, knowingly or unknowingly, you put some credits in your spiritual bank account, because there's 3 bank accounts: good karma, bad karma, and the spiritual bank account. So the good karma and bad karma, they have floating interest rate, always going up and down. But the spiritual bank account, that only increases. So depending upon where you are at in a previous life, you start off there spiritually at the same level. There may be a period of uncovering that, but it doesn't go down. So depending on how many credits we have in our spiritual bank account, this also has some influence on surrender. Because if our account is very meager or maybe even non-existent, then how will we, unless we get some powerful sadhu sangha, how will we even the thought arise to surrender or even investigate God? And everyone has a guru, but is that guru physically manifest at this time or not is another question. And there's a saying, when the student is ready, the guru will appear. Because the guru-disciple relationship is spiritual, it's not material. So therefore it's not limited to material space and time. And there's one very beautiful book called Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it tells a story of just a simple cowherd boy who received a mantra from a guru, and he ended up in the spiritual world. And right at the end of the book, he travels to so many planets in the spiritual world with different forms of God there. And right at the end of the book, he finds the planet and the particular manifestation of God that's perfect for him. So he sees Krishna there, and then they embrace. A very, very heart-touching moment. Because for eternity, Gopakumar has been in the material world with his face turned away from God, just following ego ideas. And God was feeling such separation from him. Krishna was feeling such separation. Oh, I want my beloved Gopakumar to come home. And so Krishna says to him, oh, I saw you down there on earth, and I sent so many books, so many teachings, but you weren't interested in any of them. And then I myself, I came as Jayanta, the guru, and I gave you that mantra. So actually God's mercy is everywhere. Just like right now, it's probably 79% moisture, humidity in the air. But you can't take a cup and just drink the water, drink the air. So that form upon which God condenses his mercy and pours mercy upon you, that's Sri Guru, like the cloud manifests and pour rain. But if you put your umbrella up and you don't want to get one drop of water on you, one drop of mercy on you, is that God's fault, or is that our own egoic agenda playing out? So the teachings are always available for anyone, depending on their developmental stage, but it's our own interest. And depending upon that sincerity, then closer, the physical manifestation of Guru will manifest. But the Vedas always just ask a very simple question. What's our motivation? Behind whatever you're doing. Material, karmic, job, work, family, just be honest with yourself and say, what's my motivation? Even coming to spiritual life, what's my motivation? And I'm not saying there's good ones or bad ones. You can just ask. And then if you're really willing to be honest, you'll just get such a clear analysis of your life. And then, so if we have some aversion to Guru, we can just see, well, why? What's my motivation to having a Guru or not having a Guru? Do I have aversion on some level? And then see, where's that coming from? What am I trying to hold on to that I have aversion? Because When we suffer, we only suffer because we're trying to hold on to a certain perspective. And it's always the ego that tries to hold on. It's always trying to hold on to some kind of sense of identity. And as soon as we can let that go, you can still have your preference within it, but when you try to hold on to a particular preference, then that's a prescription for suffering. So everyone, yes, 100%, to really advance in spiritual life, you absolutely need a guru. You can get to a certain level of realization with your own effort, but if you want to really dive deeper from there, it's just like any field of science, chemistry, engineering, to really go deep in that field, you need a teacher. But for some reason, we have this real prominent aversion in modern times that we don't need a teacher in spiritual life. And that's really quite bizarre when you think about it, when we just take it for absolutely granted. Any other field, yes, I need to go to school, I need to go to university, but the most important subject, spirituality, I know I can figure it out all by myself. But no, you cannot.
So there would be suffering for the ego if someone identifies with following just the perception of spirituality through Krishna.
Will there be suffering of the ego if someone follows the prescription of Krishna consciousness?
Yes, like just I'm getting now all my attention or my focus on this path, so the ego would suffer because of this, no? Because
It really depends on the individual. It depends on that sukriti, on that spiritual bank account. Because they may be coming in, you can see it with the members in the Sangha, that some are coming in at a very young age, but they have a lot of sukriti. They have a lot of merit already in their spiritual bank account. So many slokas and everything are just coming off their tongue without much effort. So for them, maybe, it's a lot easier for them to surrender and the ego won't suffer because they've already done a lot of surrender in previous lives. Another aspect of that is when you take to a path, you're very enthusiastic and you think, yes, this will be a prescription to my suffering. And if I just follow this and I jump high in the kirtan and yeah. But sometimes that's like a shooting star. And we're kind of in denial of the deeper human tendencies that are still there. And then we think, if I just try and really act like a saint or really try to act like I'm pure, then I'll just become pure and all that stuff I'm in denial of will just go away. Which that can work for some people, but sometimes it's like holding a beach ball underwater and it will pop out. So we see that in so many traditions that, some teachers, they end up having some controversy with some students. And that's because they're a little bit in denial of these tendencies that haven't been worked through. But your ego will only suffer if you're holding on to a given a preference of how you want it to be. But, deep spiritual work, when you still have a lot of ego, yeah, absolutely the ego's going to suffer. Because the ego's just trying to keep itself alive and it will do anything not to give its primary role away. Just identify with anything. Okay, you're going to become a Hare Krishna, alright. Now, you should be the best preacher in the Hare. You should give really nice talks. Oh, you give such nice talks, pat on the back, yeah. And in this way, then it becomes spiritual ego. And the ego tricks you into thinking, oh, now I'm a really spiritual person and I chant so much Hare Krishna per day and this and that. But you're still just identifying with ego. It's just that its narrative has changed. So the ego is very slippery because it doesn't want to relinquish control. Because since beginningless time, our whole survival mechanism has been based on the ego keeping itself in existence, and it's got utility, like not getting eaten by the tiger and all this kind of thing. But in terms of surrendering to Guru, surrendering to Krishna, it can bring up a lot of conflict for the ego. It's just part of the journey. But if you really want to be free from that mental prison, then you have to tolerate all these things. add anything to that? Anything else?
You said that one of the limbs of surrender is not limbs of surrender, but one of the tendencies is our tendency to make mistakes.
It's not. Yeah.
And how do we define mistakes? Because often, we do an action that we aren't happy with, but that comes from conditioning, previous samskaras, all different things. And is there there is an objective truth, I guess, which is based on how we define mistakes. But so often we see in our lives and other people's that what initially seems as a mistake is actually a blessing, bringing us closer to cultivating morality or coming closer to God. So I'm curious about how we define that mistake.
Yeah, very nice question. There's three kinds of intelligence. Those who learn by first-class intelligence, those who learn by hearing. Second-class intelligence, those who learn by seeing. And third-class intelligence, those who learn by sticking their hand in the fire. So, I can think from my own life, so many times I've stuck my hand in the fire. So, yes, we can say a mistake leads to, if we're lucky, will eventually lead to an insight, and then we can grow in consciousness from that. But that's the lowest level of intelligence, by actually having to carry out the physical action. Then by seeing the action of others, this is the middle level of intelligence. And then by hearing, this is first-class intelligence, because then you will save yourself from suffering so much by sticking your hand in the fire. And so we don't need to keep sticking our hand in the fire to learn every single lesson. We can hear from Guru, we can hear from Sastra, because Sadguru doesn't want anything from you. He doesn't want money. There's nothing you can give him. He has everything. He's floating in an ocean of Radha Krishna praying. But that Guru really wants what's best for you. Because one beautiful thing about the Guru-disciple relationship is that it's based on truth. Out of all the relationships you have in your life, it may be the only relationship that's actually based on truth, where you don't need to carry all these personas in with you, and you can be like mentally naked with the Guru, because everyone just wants to have a transparent relationship from the heart. So that Guru really wants what's best for you. And if you hear from him, you will save yourself suffering so much. Otherwise, we will go off, do all these different things, and then come back, maybe after many, many lifetimes, if we were lucky enough to even meet the Guru in the first place. Oh, Gurudev, yes, I now realize I should surrender to you. After I've suffered so much from my own, like I told the story last week of Jonah in the Bible, right? Going in the complete opposite direction of what God wanted him to do. And then he becomes captured in the belly of the whale, which represents Jiva Tattva, going into Maya, samsara, body to body to body, because our vimukkhata, our aversion from God. So, depending on our karmic scenario, yes, there's times when we're going to stick our hand in the fire, we can't get away from it. But it's nicer if we try to reduce that. It's a suggestion.
Thank you for the explanation. I'm just curious, I didn't quite make the connection to the mistakes.
So the connection to the mistakes is, so you're saying that, how can we quantify what is a mistake? Because a mistake learned can lead to an insight. So therefore, is it really a bad thing to make that mistake? So we can look at it in this way. Certain actions lead to the expansion of consciousness, and certain actions lead to the contraction of consciousness. And in that contraction of consciousness, not only we suffer, we actually bring suffering to other living entities. So you can maybe classify a mistake in that terms: expansion of consciousness, contraction of consciousness. And if we utilize first-class intelligence, then we will try to follow actions that lead to the expansion of consciousness to reduce mistakes. So not only do we save ourselves from suffering, we save giving suffering to other living entities as well. So I'm not sure if that's clear.
Yeah, no, that's a helpful framework, the expansion. Thank you.
Otherwise, yes, it can be very subjective, because what's good for someone is not so good for the other person, and then there can be a narrative, well, nothing's good, nothing's bad, but then there can be a prescription for getting away with all kinds of nonsense behavior that just leads to ultimately more contraction of consciousness. So when Vivek starts to dawn discernment, then we can see what leads to the expansion, what leads to the contraction. And in a contracted state, there's just suffering for everyone.
So is it in the first and second, is it types of learning, where either through hearing or observing, if we act on what has been taught to us from a bona fide source, such as Guru, then we can save ourselves from mistakes which will cause ourselves or others suffering, because we're not putting our hands in the fire. We don't have to engage in karma, we can just see or hear, and then we can we don't have to actually do an act, make a mistake, and suffer. Is that?
Yes, so it's twofold. One, yes, we will reduce the amount of physical actions that lead to contraction, but also if we're really engaging in sadhana and the guidance of Guru, then there will be an expansion in the internal space of consciousness. So even if we make some wrong choice or some karma happens in our life, because your consciousness will be more expanded, then you won't suffer like you previously suffered. So one, we'll most likely make less mistakes if we're following the guidance of Guru. You'd kind of hope so. And secondly, even if challenges come, because challenges will always come, you'll be more established in a more peaceful state of consciousness, that you won't get drawn into it. And in that way, when we get drawn into the contracted impressions and states of consciousness, that's where we suffer. So it's not even so much about the external things, it's the internal space. That's when we suffer. So Gurudev, by following the teachings of Guru, by chanting mantra, our whole internal space of the chitta, of the mind, expands. And then the suffering reduces, even if there's challenges. Hare Krishna, thank you for...
How can we increase sattva guna in life,
Just
like
pass it
apart
for the
from the
recording.
entire community?
So you mind repeating that just for the recording?
How can we increase sattva guna in life? I know about the diet which we have, like food also has all the three gunas. Apart from that, what we can do to increase sattva?
Yeah, this is a very nice question, and to be honest, it's probably another class to cover the gunas, like to really give a thorough explanation and get more insight into tamas, rajas and sattva, so it can really be more clear in all the departments in our life where these three energies are acting and how we can increase that sattva. So as you've mentioned, diet is a really important one. And not just eating nice vegetarian food, fresh food, but also prasadam, because that's beyond the gunas, that's transcendental. So then we're established beyond the gunas, and that's witnesshood consciousness. Just by eating blessed food, it has very much powerful spiritual potency. Also things like getting up Brahma Muhurta early in the morning, regulating your lifestyle, all these things increase sattva guna. So it's just very little increments in your life, reducing rajagun, like not watching TV, being very mindful of what's coming into your internal kingdom through the gates of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the genitals, all these things. because whatever the senses are coming in contact with, they have a proportion of the gunas. So if we try to sattvatize what's coming in through the gates of the kingdom, then naturally the internal sattva will increase. But I think this will be a very nice class to go one class just on that. Yeah. Thank you for the question. So one more kirtan before lunch, and then everyone's favourite part, prasadam.